Yeah, welcome everybody to a new episode of the M365 FM podcast. SharePoint Framework has become one of the most important technologies for developers uh, um, who need to extend Microsoft 365 beyond what organizations can accomplish with configurations alone. But there's a major difference between simply building an SPFX solution and building one that's maintainable, reusable, performant, accessibly, and ready for productions. And developers don't have built everything themselves. The Microsoft 365 community has created an enormous ecosystem around SPFX and including PnP React Controls and can dramatically accelerate develop while providing uh, providing proven building blocks for common SharePoint and Microsoft 365 scenarios. My guest today is Siddhart Vagashaya. Sorry, was
No
my
problem.
wrong. He's a Microsoft MVB for office development, independent consultant, freelancer, founder, speaker, blogger, community organizer, and specialized in Microsoft 365, SharePoint, SPFX, Power Platform, and Azure. Today, we are going deep into modern SharePoint development, SPFX architecture, React, PnP, React Controls, Microsoft Graph, APIs, authentication, Power Platform, integrations, product architecture, performance governance, and so on, and especially also AI. So, Sila, welcome to the M365 podcast.
Thank you, Mirko, and thank you for inviting me. Definitely, this is going to be a good topic to discussion to have the discussion around. Considering the SPFX is still relevant in terms of how SharePoint has been customized and everything, and as you rightly said, the community has bring a very good library around it, so people should be knowing about that.
Mm, So, how did you originally get into the Microsoft technology from how have you started?
So I started around year. I mean, like since my career started, right? It's like almost 18 years. I had been always working on Microsoft technology stack. So I started as a .NET developer when I started my IT professional career. I was working on ASP.NET and Windows applications and that sort of thing. But gradually, after a couple of years, I was kind of introduced to SharePoint, which was SharePoint on premises back then, right? And then, in a way, the journey basically kind of continued from SharePoint on premises, from SharePoint most 2007 to SharePoint 2010 to SharePoint 2013, 2019. It's only SharePoint 2016, I believe, which I have not worked on. Okay, but otherwise, I have worked on all kind of version of SharePoint, and then of course, when it gradually evolved into SharePoint Online Cloud and Microsoft 365. But yeah, this was my first kind of experience with Microsoft.
Yeah. When you say you have this all these SharePoint experience, was the moving from I say traditional SharePoint development to SPFX difficult?
Uh, in a way, yeah, it took some time to grasp, how when SPFX was introduced, right? Because the traditional way of customizing SharePoint was more or less in and around using JavaScript and using content editor web part. And if at all we needed to have, more advanced customization, we were going with custom web parts, which was basically built in .NET and that sort of thing. But as the technology evolved in terms of the web development and all the front end framework started coming in Angular, React, and that sort of thing, it was little bit different than what we traditionally used to do. But then React, because people who would understand the HTML JavaScript very well, and because React was built on top of JavaScript to make the developers life little bit more easier than what we used to do with the JavaScript. It would take some time, but eventually once you understand the importance of it, I mean, you will not go back. Like I have never went back to JavaScript or anything since I started using React.
Yeah, for someone who is new in the Microsoft 365 development, what exactly is the SharePoint framework?
Yeah. So consider that because SharePoint has so much of out of the box capabilities which are available, right? We can create pages, list. There are out of the box so many web parts which are available. But ideally, whenever an organization choose a product or choose a workflow or an application or project to be developed, there are going to be the times when the business requirement from the business is going to be which is not going to fit into the right out of the box available features which are there, right? So there would be always the time where we need to customize it, and that is where SharePoint framework basically comes into the picture. So there are different options in which we can customize the SharePoint. We can customize a SharePoint with header and footer to put our custom content into a SharePoint site, which is basically called as application customizer. And then we have mainly our web parts, right, which basically allows us to customize and create our custom user interface and deploy it into a SharePoint page, more or less like out of the box web part which we have. And
Mm.
then now we also have the SPFX extensions which are available, through which we would be able to add the command set into an out of the box SharePoint list or library view, so that you can add your custom command button on top of it and then perform some operations if you want to make an API integration call and that sort of thing, right? And very new feature within SPFX is SharePoint SPFX Copilot apps. It means by using the same SharePoint framework, we would be able to create an app which would be surfaced into Microsoft 365 Copilot by using, the same kind of UI component. So rather than interacting with the agent or Copilot with just, text format,
Mhm.
if we would have built an SPFX Copilot apps and deploy it by using the MCP server and by using the tools, the Copilot would be able to basically find the component and display it into Copilot in Agent, which would become interactive in nature.
Awesome. That's cool. Is there uh n- where will you say when people start with SPFX today? Where can developers find a good way to start?
So there are very good YouTube videos which are available, right, on SPFX, on getting started with SPFX. That would be one of the channel which I would suggest, to people get introduced to if they wanted to get started with SPFX. Another thing
Mhm.
is they need to definitely learn the basic of React, okay, because without having the React knowledge, it would become difficult for certain people to understand how the components can be created and how the components would be called from the different component, how you can create reusable component and all that sort of thing. So yes, YouTube channel is the right place to go for. There are lot and lots of videos which are available, which are free. And then Microsoft documentation is also a good example to get started with, and then some starting with some basic React understanding.
Mhm. And what kind of business requirements are ideal candidates for SPFX, and what should absolutely not build with SPFX?
So I would say that if, I mean, yeah, there's always been an, kind of argument wherein do we want to customize SharePoint or not whenever a business requirement comes. So, I mean, as everybody would suggest, a good baseline would be that if you wanted to build something in SharePoint, show something in SharePoint, does Microsoft provide it, right? If you have a yes and no answer, if you have a yes answer, do not build it, right?
Mm. Okay.
If Microsoft doesn't provide it, but you are going to build it. But does it is it solving a bigger problem or just a smaller problem?
Yeah.
Are there any alternate ways for you to basically still use the SharePoint out of the box feature, not give that kind of experience which the user is expecting, but basically work out with the user or the business user to make sure that they are okay with basically how they are interacting with SharePoint. If they agree, then just go with out of the box. Don't do any customization, right? But you know how business users are, right? I mean, sometimes what they want, they want. They would not agree to something which is not available or any alternate solution which they wanted to propose. In that case, we do not have any choice and we should go with, kind of SPFX.
Okay. And how is it with main intents when, I don't know, SharePoint Online 2.0 comes out, or something? Is there anything I have to look when I customize?
Yes, so yes, definitely, because SharePoint framework gets quickly, new versions which are available, right? There might be, because it's a pro code based approach, so there would be definitely at times wherein, if your SPFX solutions are so too old with the older version, and if there are some methods, if there are some attributes or certain things which are getting depreciated, then you need to upgrade it. But otherwise, I have seen customers and organizations who have and for framework solution being deployed, which is like 6 7 years old, right? And they're still on SPFX version 1.4, 1.5, 1.6. Right now we are around, I think 1.21 or 22 is the latest version, but the solution is still working. So until and unless it is necessary for you to upgrade, does your organization's policies, IT policies, ask you to upgrade it if there are any security loopholes which are being found in the packages which you are using and all that sort of thing? Then yeah, of course it should be it has to be. But now with AI and everything, it is very easily to upgrade it also. You just have to basically go to GitHub Copilot or use Claude or Codex, and just say that, hey, this I'm using this version, I wanted to just upgrade it, and it will just upgrade it basically for you.
Mm, mm. And when I think a little bit about, we have on one time we have to have an if SPFX project, and we are also the Power Platform with Power Automate and Power Pages. When is SPFX the right decision, and when should I build a Power Platform?
Yeah, yeah, that's a very good question. And again, same discussion start happening whenever we choose to customize something, right? So if you think about it in a way, whenever we want to customize the SharePoint list or a library form, right, which is
Mm,
basically customizing that, then there is one option wherein we can customize the form with Power Apps, and then we can basically, customize the form and update the UI and everything according to the Power Apps controls which are available and within the boundaries of what Power Apps basically allows us to do, right? And then there is an SPFX thing which is basically will, and in fact now with SPFX form customizer you can still do the same thing but using a pro code approach, right?
yeah.
When it comes to Power Apps, because Power Apps has its own control, its own way of doing things, you have limitations there, right, in terms of how you are going to build the user interface. I know there are so many, great people around who has built a Power Apps which you doesn't feel like it's a Power Apps. They were able to basically make it more than that. But for a normal developer, sometimes it becomes difficult to basically get the required user interface and control and everything within Power Apps. Just giving one example, like for example, in the Power Apps, if you wanted to show data combined from two different data sources, two different SharePoint lists or two different Dataverse tables, right? You can only associate one gallery with one data source. You cannot do it with multiple by associating with multiple gallery or data source, right? So in this case what you would have to do is you would have to first get the data, put it into collection and combine the data and then put it here, right? Same if we go with SPFX, because you are doing it with an API call, you can merge the data. Combining the data in the JSON format is far far easier than what we do it with the Power Apps and everything. So there is one difference there. So I would say if you need a very very good user interface, you can basically go with SPFX and can create a full-fledged application there, right? If you do with the Power Apps, if you have a simple requirements in terms of showing some fields based on certain conditions and putting some business simple business rules around it, I would say go with the Power Apps, right? Another thought would be that initially the time to develop an SPFX thing was higher, right? When I say higher, it was far more than low code platform, and then people were choosing a low code platform to customize something. But
Mm,
now it has definitely changed, because now with AI, in fact, building something AI with SPFX is far far easy than when you are doing it with Power Apps. I mean, creating something in Power Apps with the AI and the Copilot and Claude, it gives us certain results to certain time. but not as we get with the SPFX. I mean, with SPFX you can do wonder with all this GitHub Copilot and Claude and all that sort of thing. So it also depends on, as you rightly said, that depends on how much time do you have. Do you want to maintain the code or not? Good thing about Power Apps is that you are not maintaining the code. You do not need an skill set with React or SPFX. Any citizen developer can go there, look at the code and see what has been done. But somebody who doesn't understand SPFX, they would not know until and unless they understand what the SPFX is about and all that sort.
Yeah, yeah. Let's a little bit look inside a modern SPFX project. So there, it's I think a wide wide technology stack actually. So we have TypeScript, JavaScript, Fluent UI, PnP.js, PnP React Controls. Um, Let us start with TypeScript. What TypeScript knowledge is essential for a project?
So in a way, TypeScript knowledge wouldn't be required that much, right? Because ideally, what TypeScript is a way for us to. It's an advanced version of JavaScript. So in JavaScript, there was no strong typed or interface which was available, and hence Microsoft came up with a TypeScript, saying that you can, if you are doing client-side development also. You can still kind of create an interface or class or models which would be strongly interfaced. You can create strongly typed classes, models and attributes, so that if you are writing the code, it doesn't have any leak around what code has been written, what attribute needs to be written, what should be the type, if the date type is actually been assigned a date type or not, and we get all type of compile time errors. Okay, so TypeScript in a way is just about it's more or less C sharp only. So for anybody who understands C sharp, somebody who understands Java, anybody can just get it. It's just an this thing only.
Awesome. And what's the role of Fluent UI?
Fluent UI is basically an UI framework from Microsoft to basically build the user interface, right? So if you think about it, that if you are doing a customization in SharePoint, you need something which is not available out of the box, but you want the user to still feel like they are in SharePoint itself. So Fluent UI is that library which basically gives you all the user interface controls, which merely works similar to what SharePoint control looks like. So you have buttons, you have drop downs, you have checkboxes, you have gallery, all sort of things. That is something which is a front end library which is available.
Mm, mhm. And then we have also PnP.js. How
Correct.
does this fit in?
Yeah, right. So, because whenever we are building an SPFX solution, right, more or less we wanted to get data from SharePoint. We want to get data from Graph API, OneDrive. It can be anything, right? So,
Mhm.
what has happened was the way the PNP React controls kind of evolved, the same way PNP JS kind of evolved, because people were following the same pattern. Everybody, like me or another developer who were building it, everybody needs similar kind of service class to interact with your SharePoint, to interact with your Graph API, to interact with your any kind of Microsoft 365 products which are available. So that was kind of becoming a pattern. Now we were repeating the same kind of code, right? Making a REST API call takes 5 line of code. That code was been repeatedly written by everybody by in the same code base itself, and that is where PnPjs comes into picture. What it does, it gives us the wrapper library on top of it, which takes care of authentication on its own, which takes care of the request object response and everything. Plus it is giving us an easy way to write the code. Rather than writing 5 6 line of codes, I can just write 1 line of code and get data from SharePoint, update data SharePoint into back, and that sort of thing. And when I'm saying this, I'm just saying a very simpler and basic way of understanding PnPjs. It is so much more than that. I mean, you would not imagine writing an SPFX code where you are directly making an HTTP request call unless you are doing a proof of concept or basic, web part. You should always go with PnPjs basically.
Mm. And then the last thing I see, it's the PnP React Controls.
Yeah. Now, I mean, the way PnPjs, I gave the example, right? That people started writing similar kind of code to get data from SharePoint and Graph API and everything. Same way, there were controls which has to be created, right? For example, you wanted to create a drop-down control, which is going to show you an item from a particular list. Okay, then what you need to do is you need to use Fluent UI. You need to create the drop down. You need to make an API call, bind the data with the drop down, and that sort of thing. Now, because of that, what has happened was that in a way people were writing similar kind of code again, and similar kind of controls were being created every time. So what community came up with, right? And I think it was in 2018 or something, right? SPFX came in 2017. The React controls kind of came in 2018 somewhere, at the end of the year or something. And thanks to community, like we now have so many controls which are available, which can be easily used. To give some example, like for example, we wanted to create a folder picker control. It means we want to allow user to basically select a folder while you're building an SPFX solution, right? So if I have to build it and I have to build it in three different places, I'm kind of repeating the same kind of code. So rather than that, there are controls available which are SharePoint aware controls, which are Microsoft 365 aware controls. So rather than me writing the code again and again, the control has to be configured in such a way that I just say that, hey, this control needs to point it to this library, automatically makes the API call, gets the data, bind the control, and gives us all the customization options which are available. Another is file picker. If you wanted to allow user to select a file, upload a file into your SharePoint, okay, this kind of user interface. Then there is filter bar, icon bar. I mean, there are lots of controls which are available, and through which it is going to be making your life easier to develop an SPFX solution, because all these controls are readily available, tested, verified, and available in the community for anyone to use without rebuilding the thing. So
Mm,
rebuilding is main point of PnP React controls.
mm, awesome. And how do you decide between Microsoft components, PnP components, and building your own?
Again, same concept. If Microsoft provides, yes, use that. Does Fluent UI provides that? Yes, use that. But are you going to use, what is your use case, right? If you are creating a drop down, and that same drop down is going to be reused across different section of your solution, and what you want to do is you wanted to display, for example, employee name or a people picker, right? That means you want to allow user to choose the name of the people within your organization, right? What you will do, you will have to, if you are just using Fluent UI, there is a people control available, but behind the scene you need to make the API call first. You need to get the list of the user. Whenever user type searching my name like Siddharth, right, and they will say SID, then I need to make the API call to get, okay, give me all the names starting from SID, and then again render it back into this thing. But people picker control is already available in React, PnP React library, right? So why don't we use it? Behind the scene, it is still using Fluent only. Behind the scene, it is still making the same API call which I was supposed to make, right? And then you do it. So if you think, the philosophy I generally take is, when we are building SPFX solutions, right?
Mhm.
Okay, what is your need? Does that need been satisfied from PnP React controls? Yes, use it. If not, then only go with the custom component. Then only go with your custom component or UI which is required. But if it is already available, always go for React controls which is there.
Yeah. Let's a little bit deeper dive into the PnP Rec control. So when I have here the expert, so if you could choose for only five PnP Rec controls for SPFX development to learn, which would you choose?
Five controls. Okay, people picker number one, because it's definitely something where everybody is going to use. Um, Second, I would say taxonomy picker, right? You wanted to build a solution wherein you wanted to get and allow user to select the taxonomy to associate some metadata with particular list or library or whatsoever. That is second one. Uh, Third, I would say list view. Why? Because more or less, when you are going to build a solution with SPFX, you wanted to get data from SharePoint and display it in the similar kind of table view what we have it out of the box. It is going to be very much easier to use. File picker is also very important, because the file picker control which is available in React, if you see the user interface, it basically merely depicts the exactly the same picker control which SharePoint provides us when you are going to say attach a file, right? And what we get in Teams also, like on the left hand side you see all the recent SharePoint sites or recent files. If you want to select a file, you select a file. If you wanted to upload a custom document, you get that kind of options also available within there. So file picker would be the one. Another is persona. Okay, so persona control is basically you wanted to display somebody's name, right? Like who is there in Microsoft 365 in your organization tenant. It gives you the same experience what you have it in your all SharePoint. So you can put a name, you hover over it, it will open the pop-up where it will display, name and photo and email and whatnot. And then there are tabs and everything also available. So I think, yeah, live persona is also one of the good control which you can use. How many I said? People picker, taxonomy, list view, file picker, live persona. I think, yeah, top five should be there.
Uh, mm, when we look, or let's build something conceptually. Imagine a customer asks us for sophisticated project management experience inside SharePoint. Where do you begin?
What does, sorry, I did not get what customer asks, which
Ask us for a sophisticated project management experience inside SharePoint.
project management experience, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So see, project management experience in the sense like we can use SharePoint list, right, for creating the required database tables to store the project related informations, to store client related information, to store the resources associated with your project, to store the task associated with your project, that sort of thing.
Mm,
All this experience, if you think about it, yes, SharePoint would be there available for us to basically store the data in SharePoint list and libraries and everything. But now when you're talking about an experience where you wanted to give it and user a single place wherein they would be able to see a dashboard, how many projects are there in the system, how many projects are in progress, how many projects are at high risk, how many projects are at low risk, that sort of data, right? So, and for each project, when I click on one project, I wanted to see what are the resources associated with that project. Now we would not be able to store all this information into a single list. So if you use SharePoint out of the box, you will not be able to go and give the user an experience that you click on a project, now you're seeing all the resources associated with. If you click on a project, now you are seeing all the tasks associated with that project, right? So in this case, if you think about it, what we will build a project management dashboard, a PMO dashboard, which is getting data from SharePoint. A dashboard is going to give you an high executive level view of all the projects which are there, how many projects are completed, how many projects are at risk, high level and everything. In fact, if you want, you can put the charts also, right? Then because there are all the chart library controls which are available, so you can put the charts and everything also on top of it. You can show some recent updates or recent activities related to certain projects, certain tasks being created and that sort of thing. So this is like, whole dashboard experience. And then on the left hand side or on the top, you can give a navigation to all projects. So where you go there, you see list of all the projects which are available. You would be able to give them crude operations on the project. So user clicks on it, they would be able to update the metadata of that particular project. They can change the due date, status, and whatnot. Plus, you can control it, right? You can
mm,
security control it. Now it means that based on your business requirement, you want certain fields only to be editable to certain set of users. You can program it in your code that okay, this five fields only would be editable when the user logged in user is a project manager. If it is just a team member, then they should not be able to update the project name or project details or whatnot, right? They should only be able to access the task and everything. So that can also be programmed.
mm.
You can have a
And
task view. Sorry,
mm,
go ahead.
no, no, no.
Yeah. So you can have a task view there, like a planner. You can have drag and drop. You can change the status of the task. You can create new task, assign task. If you want to put some billing information or some hours associated with task, that sort of thing, you can do it. If you want to use behind the scene planner, you can do that also. Like not using SharePoint list, but use getting data from the planner, plan and task and all sort of thing, but displaying it into a single unified user experience which you can get.
Mm. And is there also cases when you say I put my data into Dataverse or Azure SQL, or did you ever use SharePoint list?
No, you can, right? Because SharePoint is going to give you what? SharePoint is going to give you a way for user to basically come to a place which is familiar to them because they are already using SharePoint. But now you wanted to build something which is going to get data from outside of your SharePoint system. So if you wanted to do it, you can basically make API calls to Dataverse, right? Because a SharePoint framework solution is associated with an Azure Intra ID app registration, whatever permissions would be required for your solution to be accessed to data to be accessed within Microsoft 365 ecosystem, you can just put it in your configuration file. Once you deploy the solution, your SharePoint admin would be able to come. They would be able to approve that, okay, this solution is accepted to basically make this API call and get this data, and then you can make the calls and make bring data from the dataverse and everything, right? In fact, I had recently submitted one a dashboard, okay, which basically shows you, you would know Power Automate approvals which we do, right? Now anybody who user who wanted to see what are the approvals which are available, they would go to flow.microsoft.com and see in the approval URL, or they would use Microsoft Teams approval app. There they would be able to see all the approvals which are there, right? There was one asked from a customer that, hey, I don't want to go to Flow, right? It's confusing for the user. For user, SharePoint is the place where they wanted to go because they are very much familiar. Okay, but there is no web part, out of the box web part available. So I built a web part for them to basically display the approvals in the SharePoint as an SPFX web part, plus give them ability to approve and reject also from there. Okay, and that I had contributed in the community also. But yeah, so this is one a good example, right? You can get data from your Dataverse tables also. You also talked about SQL, right? So if your data is in your SQL, ideally, when we are running a client side application, right, we cannot directly make API calls to any backend database, right, like SQL or anything, unless there is an API which is available. So if there is a database in SQL, same is it is same for every modern application which are being built, right? Nowadays, nobody is directly interacting. The front end is not never interacting with the database or anything. There would be always an API middle layer which is created. So you build an API. The API is going to talk to your SQL. Your SPFX is going to talk to your middleware, which is your API, and then building the user interface. So in that case, also, SPFX definitely works.
Mm, awesome. I think another topic a lot of developers speak, it's the Microsoft Graph API. When come the Graph API to SPFX development?
Yeah. So as we say, right, I mean, the last question also you asked is that if you're building an SPFX solution, it is not just about SharePoint. It means that your data might reside outside of SharePoint also. You wanted to get data from outside of the system, like Dataverse, like SQL, and third can be Graph. Now, for example, you are building an SPFX solution, which wanted to get data and show data from your OneDrive file, right? It means that you wanted to users OneDrive, it goes to users OneDrive and then get data from users OneDrive and display it there. As Graph API is basically an unified way for us to make API calls to Microsoft 365 ecosystem across all the products which are available, same Graph API can be integrated into your SPFX. So if you wanted to get data from your OneDrive, if you want to get data from Planner, if you want to get data from your emails like Outlook, right? You wanted to get the data for the user. You want to get your meetings, for example. You want to get your meeting recordings. That sort of thing. Anything which is possible in the Graph API, which you wanted to get data from, plus you wanted to update also, that is possible within SPFX. So you basically use the graph library which is available, the graph client factory library which is available. That is a native way of accessing a graph API in the SPFX. But if not, PnPjs also has the same thing. So I would say go with PnPjs. It has, easier way to basically do it.
That's is there anything the SharePoint APIs cannot provide what Graph API provide, or when I choose what?
Yeah, so as I said, the choice of using SharePoint REST API versus Graph API lies in that whether you are doing certain operation in SharePoint or outside of SharePoint. SharePoint REST API are also so much of having so much of operations which are available, right? I mean, with using SharePoint REST API, you can create lists also, you can create libraries also, right? You can set the site properties, you can set tenant level properties. There are so vast APIs which are available. But the choice between SharePoint REST API and Graph API, one would be when you are doing certain things in SPFX which is outside of SharePoint, like the example which I gave. Second, I mean, another thing is i- i- previously we used to have a send email API available in SharePoint through which you can send an email. Now Microsoft is basically depreciating it. It means now you cannot send an email from SharePoint REST API. Then you have to rely on the Graph API, right? Basically, so that's the ideal distinction that okay, if something is available in SharePoint REST API to do certain operation which is available and you're doing it with SharePoint, go with SharePoint. If not, obviously you have to go with Graph API only.
Yeah. And how do permissions work when SPFX solutions call Microsoft Graph?
Yes, so good thing about SharePoint framework is that it basically respect the same delegated permission of current logged in user, right? So when you are building an SPFX solution based on what operation you are doing, right? There is a manifest file which is available in which you have to actually configure the permissions. Okay, and once the solution gets deployed, the SharePoint admin has to approve that solution. Okay, in the SharePoint admin center, that there is a tab called API access. You go there, you see that as soon as the solution is deployed and the permissions are not there, you would see something called as pending API approvals. Admin has to choose and give the approval. Once that approval is only given, then only your code would be able to make the actual API calls, whatever they are asking, right?
Mhm.
Second thing is, by default, an SPFX solution always works with the delegated permission. It means that no matter what, though your solution has permission to do certain operations, but if you as a user who is browsing a SharePoint page, who where the SPFX code is going to run, it is always going to run from your consent, from your delegated permission, from with your access token, with your identity token. So if your code is trying to access the data on which you do not have permission, the code will not run. For example, your code, you got an access to a page where an SPFX solution is deployed, but that SPFX solution is getting data from a different SharePoint list, from a different SharePoint site, and on
Mhm.
which you do not have permission, right? In that case, the data will not work. So by default it is a security trimmed one, so it is very much secure, and you won't be able to make an API calls on which you do not have access to. And plus you will be only be able to get the data within SharePoint list itself, right? If you have item level permissions, if you have document level permissions, you will only get and able to access the data which is available for you, which you have access to. There is no application level permission is possible. If you need to do that, then you need to go with the API route which I discussed previously, that okay, build your own API. The API is connecting with this all data source with an application permissions, and the front end is calling your application API basically.
Yeah, cool, interesting. Um, Also, this was would be my second question, but yeah, you have explained it, what the difference is between delegated and application
Affects.
permissions.
Yeah,
So,
oh, right, right.
I will let's go a little bit deeper into the security topic. What are the biggest security mistakes you see in custom Microsoft 65 solutions?
So when you say big security means as a developer, right? I mean, as a developer, people do.
Yeah.
Correct? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. So yes, um, I mean, as a developer, right? What we generally used to do, we basically used to get the higher permission than it is required. Okay. Which is a very, very big mistake. Any developer, who doesn't understand the permission well, do that. Let me give you an example. So, for example, your web part is supposed to basically get data from a SharePoint list, right? And it's a read only operation. You do not, the business requirement doesn't allow you to or want you to update anything from your SPFX solution.
Good.
Now, what you did is did it, right? But what you did is the permission which you have asked into your solution is read write rather than just read. Okay. So when nothing is going to be harmed, why? Because your code is not doing it, but you as a developer has given the solution an extra permission which is not required. How do you know the next developer who is going to come is going to do something, and write a code which mistakenly is going to update something which was not required, right? So this is the common mistake which people do, that they always start with the higher permission, but rather the recommendation is always start with the lower permission. First only get the permission which is minimal permission which you would require, and do not get the higher permission which would be required, right? Second thing is, while they are building the solution, they generally do not consider the actual user's permission. So what, like I have seen an SPF, I mean solutions wherein it just blindly assume that when I am developing it, I am having access to this list, this library, this site, the user is only also going to have. So what they do is they develop it, they test it from their side, and they're saying yes, it is working fine. But now
Mm.
when you are exposing it to the user, they have not taken care of the actual permission of giving that user permission to the list or library on which they have. And then user will say that, okay, you are seeing that is fine, but you are seeing something different, I'm not seeing it. I'm just seeing a blank screen, or I'm not seeing the required data which I wanted to see. So they have
Mm.
considered the permission in their SPFX code, but overall, as a solution designer, they have not given the right permission to the right component within SharePoint, within Dataverse, and that sort of thing. And that is,
And
again, a common mistake. Yeah.
yeah, and is I work more with Fabric, so I have a lot. I use often Azure Key Vault. Is it also a topic for SharePoint development?
No, because SharePoint is a client-side development tool, right? Key Vault basically will not work here. Why? Because if you whatever code you are going to deploy, and the user is going to browse your code from the browser, right? Anything which you are going to put right within your code in a way is going to be converted into JavaScript and then rendered into the browser. So never, never, ever put any key vault or secret information in your SPFX code. If you want to do it, the right way to do it is via API, right? So your API is running behind the scene, behind the server, hosted somewhere, where
Mm.
it is accessing the Azure Key Vault, getting the required secret key, all the permission, and your front end is only able to make call to the APIs basically.
Mm. And do Entra ID and PureView plays a role in the SPFX development?
Intra ID does, not the PIP. The intra ID, why? Because as I said, by default, whenever in a particular tenant, if you are deploying the first SPFX solution, what it does is it provisions an app registration or intra ID app registration into your tenant. It is called as SharePoint framework extensibility something. I don't remember the exact name, but that intra ID is by default created there. And any further solution which you are going to deploy basically use the same intra ID.
And w- how can we, I think, how can we have a process for security? I think like, yeah, how I ask it. Uh, should organization have a formal security review for custom SPFX packages, or is it all every time secure?
No, no, it has to. The reason being, because SPFX framework is supported or developed using all the modern open source tooling chain, right? So which npm package you are using, your developer is using, whether that package is something which is a stable package, whether that package which is available is from a trusted developer, right? Because it's an open source tool. So whether it is by a trusted developer or not, if it is by a trusted developer, then you should use it. Some organization also restrict that you cannot publicly use any npm package which is available, because SharePoint framework is based on that. You will be able to use any package which is available in the Node.js, like the whole library, npm package library, sorry. So As an organization governance tool, whenever an SPFX solution is being deployed, it has to be checked through various processes in terms of security, vulnerability, and all of that. Okay. Good thing is that what I have personally seen is that when you are building a Node.js based application, when you are trying to build a package or trying to run the package in any Node.js based thing, which SPFX does also use, it will give you some warnings,
Mhm.
right? When you are compiling it, it will say that, hey, you are using an npm package which is so outdated. If you're using an npm package which has somebody has flagged a security vulnerability into this package. Okay, so the good thing is, if you do not ignore the errors, right, and you focus on the warnings, what does warning says, is the warning serious, is the warning is supposed to be not neglected, but we need to do something about it, that is going to basically help you. But because it's a pro code tool, there are tools also which are available, which is going to do you a code review assessment for you within your SPFX and identify all the security vulnerability on this all these packages, which you can basically gives you the report around that. And once you basically get the report, it would be up to you as a developer for you to kind of fix it, depending on how serious the security vulnerability is.
Yeah, I, I, I think security is it's a good keyword. I have worked on a big company, and they have also an SPF solution built in SharePoint for security trainings, and this was so amazing slow that you have to get 15 minutes before the course started. You have to click log into the course.
Okay.
Because it was so damn slow. Where did you start when people give the feedback, this SPFX is damn slow? Where can we start?
Okay. Yeah. What I would do, right? If people, I mean, I had solved that similar kind of problem as you said, that somebody developed it and said it is slow. We wanted to identify why it is slow, right? Where I would start is I would start browse the page in the browser. While I'm browsing the page, I'll open the network tab, right? And I will see in the network tab, whenever the user is refreshing the page, how many API calls are being made. If for example there are 10 calls which we identified, okay, which are being made, is the 10 calls necessary or not? Why? Because sometimes what the developer does, he just feels that whatever data I wanted to get, I will get it on the page load itself while the React component is getting loaded itself. Okay, that might not be necessary, right? There
Mm,
might be three API calls which you would need only when the user is doing some operation on the screen. So first identify what are the unnecessary API calls. Second thing is, when you are seeing the network tab, you might sometimes, I have seen that what people do is by mistake people would have made an API call in the loop itself, right? So for example, you have a parent and a child list or a data table relationship which you have. So what you want to do is you wanted to basically get all the items from your parent list, but for each parent list item you also want to get data from the child list to bring some attribute or columns in it, right? What people would have done, rather than calling both the data and making two API calls, people what they would have done, they would have make the first API call, get data from the parent, made a for loop, each loop, for each item in the parent they would be calling a child list. Okay, so for example, wondering, like if there are 50 items which are there in the parent list, what you are doing is you are making one API call to your parent items, then for each 50 items you are making a child API call, so there are 51 API calls which are going, and then you are waiting because all the 51 items has to be processed, then you are combining the data and then you are displaying it to the user, right?
mm,
Rather than that, you have to optimize your code, get the data from the parent, get the data from the child as in required, and then do the operation at the client side, whatever combination you have to do, the mappings you have to do. Because you said you are working with fabric, right? Like that is what we do with the DAX formulas and everything, that okay, how the data should be associated, clubbed together, and then you point it to a particular chart or dashboard, rather than keeping two both separately, right? So exactly the same way, you should do. Network tab is your best friend. Second thing, what you want to do is, nowadays there are also extensions available in the browser which will allow you to also debug your React components, right? So there might be certain things wherein within the loop itself, there might be so much of so many times you are actually rendering the React control, one by one, because React is a state management control. It means what you are doing is, you are rendering a React control and then changing the state. And as soon as you are changing the state, you would have written a code to make another API call, or it would go into some kind of loop until a particular condition is met, and that is where your screen will freeze and user is going to see. So that is also something important, that go to the React component extension library, see that how your React components are basically kind of behaving.
Mm. And the topics batching and catching, caching.
Yeah, yes, 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 always, always, right? Good that you brought up. I almost forgot it, right? Yes. What you can do is, once you identify this kind of issues, right? I mean, I said how to identify, I never said how to fix it. So once you identify this kind of issues, then you know that based on your business logic on how you wanted to make these calls, you can basically batch your API calls. So rather than sending one by one, you can create a single request object and do the batch operations, and the SharePoint would respond based on that. Okay, if it is a patch, for example, you are updating data into five different lists. Okay, prepare everything together and make one batch API call, so that all the five operations which we are doing are going to be taking care in the one operation itself, right? At least from the client side. Behind the scene, the batch operation still makes all the different calls, but we are not doing it at the client side. That is happening at the server side, because SharePoint support the batching operations and all that sort of thing.
Mm.
Yeah.
Um, w- we as developers, I think a lot of developers often, yeah, heavily focused on functionality. And I think the other topic, it's for the users, it's the accessibility. Um, where do here the Fluent UI and the PnP React controls help?
So I mean, there are certain controls, at least in the Fluent UI I know, which are basically having some attributes and properties which are available to make it, accessible across, for the like considering all the accessibility point of view, right? So depending on if you wanted to do it, what it will do is, there are properties or attributes available which you can set, so that your control is basically rendered, and it's basically supported with all all kind of accessibility mechanism and all of that. For PnP React control, to be very transparent, I'm not sure whether that is there or not, but I am assuming it will be. The reason being, behind the scene, most of the React controls are still using the Fluent UI only to render it. Okay, so eventually, what the React controls are doing, they are wrapper around your API calls. A bridge between your API calls and your Fluent controls, right? Eventually, it is the Fluent control only which gets displayed. So I think indirectly that also should be supported. That is what I know. But that is a good point which you brought in, which I would definitely go back and look and see that, okay, how we can make accessibility also supported when we are building an SPFX solution.
Mm. And when now I have my app ready, all is fine. Um, how how I get my components into the app catalog?
Yes. So as an SPFX solution can have multiple web parts, multiple extensions, you can build a whole solution around it, right? As and when you are ready for deploying, right? What you do is, there are commands available. Previously it used to be gulp, now it is heft, which is going to package the solution. So when you package the solution, what it will give you an SPPKG file. Okay, the extension of the package is sp.pkg file. What you do, you copy the file, right, and you go to your SharePoint admin center, and there is an app catalog. Now this app catalog is a tenant level app catalog, where you are actually deploying the package. Okay, so this is where also we have to understand that deploying is not installing. Okay, it is just deploying means you are making it available for the people to install it into the targeted SharePoint site. So you deploy your package into a tenant level app catalog. I'll talk about SharePoint site collection level app catalog also later. But okay, the ideally you deploy it into the tenant level app catalog. If your solution needs some extra permissions, you go to admin center, you approve the permission as a SharePoint admin, then you go to targeted SharePoint site, and then you basically install it, right? Now, what does install means? It means the package you have deployed, and SharePoint is more than just document management system, right? It can be used for so many different ways. An organization can have 1,000 sites. You don't want to deploy your solution into 1,000 sites until and unless it is necessary. You only want to deploy it into one site, two site, or wherever it is, right? So what you do is you go to a SharePoint site and then you install it as an app. And once you install it as an app, that is when all the web parts and components would be available for you to add it into your SharePoint page. That is where your custom web part started showing up in the SharePoint page for the targeted site. So this is how the deployment work. I talked about tenant level app catalog, but there are organizations who would say that I don't want to deploy at all at my tenant level because I'm building an, for example, an intranet solution, or I'm just building an contact management solution. I want my solution to only deploy it into the targeted SharePoint site, nowhere else, right? What you can do is you can enable a site collection level app catalog. There is a PowerShell script which is available. Once you do it, it just creates a library within your SharePoint site. And then rather than deploying it into a tenant level app catalog, you deploy it into an site collection level app catalog. Still you install it, right? Because now again you have just deployed it on your site collection. Still you install it, and then you go ahead and use it in your web part and everything.
That's amazing. So I think I have so much more questions, but we're running out of time. So yeah, you're in independent consulting. Who looks your ideal client?
So yeah, I mean, my LinkedIn definitely says independent consultant, which I am still. So what I do is I'm also founder of company called Binary Roots. So I have team of around 25 people, back in offshore in India, and we provide services on Microsoft 365, Power Platform, SharePoint, Azure, Copilot Studio, and everything. You said about clients, so I have client in US. I have client in Australia. I have client in UAE. I have client in Israel, and also I have also client in Europe. Like couple of clients which are there in Europe also. But yeah, this is like different client base which we have, which we support, and we kind of do the similar kind of exercise which we do with any Microsoft 365 based ecosystem.
Mm. And a lot of people actually now speaking about. Uh, I think Copilot was yesterday. Actually, all speak about agents. What role do agents plays in SPFX?
Yes. So as I said, right, like Microsoft recently with the last release, they have released for the public preview the SharePoint Copilot apps. Okay. So it still says SharePoint Copilot apps, and they are saying that they might rebrand it to something else, as always. But Copilot apps is basically allowing us to build an user interface which can be embedded into agents. Now, that agent can be a Copilot agent. In fact, there can be that would be only the agent. I mean, the Copilot user interface on which you are going to do. So, what you are doing is now the same SharePoint framework is allowing you to actually customize your Copilot user interface. So rather than showing the responses just in the text format, in the markdown language and whatnot, you are actually building a component which would be rendered in the Microsoft 365 Copilot, where user will ask something, the component would be rendered, but then now they can interact on it, right? They don't have to say, okay, I want to submit it. Rather than that, they are going to get the form, they are going to fill in the form, and then they are going to kind of submit it. The way I relate it to is basically an advanced version of adaptive card, right? With adaptive card, what we get is we get few controls, but we do not get a fully immersive or UI experience or customization experience, right? But with SPFX Copilot apps, we do get that. So that is what the role is going to be of SPFX into, the agent development and that sort of thing.
Mm, cool. Yeah, we're running a little bit out of time. I have in every session a rapid fire round. I give a short question. You can give me a short. I start with low code or pro code.
I would say pro code.
Most underrated SPFX feature.
Um, Underrated SPFX feature, I would say extensions.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And if Satya Dalia calls you today and says that you get all the money and resources you need, what SPFX feature will you build?
What I would build. Okay. Yeah, I would build some kind of Power Automate workflow automation kind of capability within SPFX itself so that we do not rely on the Power Automate if you want to build it. Yeah.
Mm. Is there any myth you will bust about SPFX?
Uh, yeah, now I mean at this point in time, yes, I can that SPFX is faster to develop than Power Apps. Some people are still under the myth that it's the other way around, but now with the generative AI and everything, that is the myth. SPFX is faster than developing Power Apps.
So, coffee, tea, or energy drink during development?
T.
uh, what's the one skill junior developers underestimate?
What is the one skill? Sorry, I didn't know. What is the one skill?
One skill junior developers underestimate.
Mm, I would say React. I don't know. I mean, people generally don't feel it, but I would say that, yeah.
Okay, and who should I invite next, and what question should I ask?
I would say you can invite Nandip. Okay, Nandip
Maybe.
Nachan. I'll give you the reference and what questions you can ask. You can ask question about Azure AI Foundry. I mean, he is exploring it and he is very good at it. So yeah, that would
Cool.
be my choice.
Yeah. So I would say thank you for this amazing session and joining me today. And yeah, I think yeah, one of the biggest lesson from this conversion is that professional development doesn't mean building everything yourself. There's a lot of great stuff. The Microsoft 365 ecosystem already gives developer enormous foundation through SharePoint framework, React Graph, API, Power Platform, PnP.js, PnP React Controls, Fluent, Azure, and yeah, also the community. Yeah, I think the real skill for me is knowing how combine those building blocks into a solution that are security maintainable, performant, and actually solves a business problem. And yeah, I think yeah, there's a lot of new AI. Um, yeah, brings a lot of new better ideas how we can make things better but faster and so on. And yeah,
Of
for
course.
everyone, um, you find all the information about it in the show notes on the MC35M podcast. And yeah, so I say thank you again for being part of the show.
Thank you for inviting. Thank you. It was nice talking to you.